Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Gregory, co-founder and CEO of Modern Wisdom Press. Welcome to Modern Wisdom Moments, where we feature our fantastic authors and the important work they're doing in the world. And I'm so thrilled that we have Jen Ostrich with us today, who is an executive coach and the CEO of Grow Collective. She's written an amazing book called Feedback Reimagined: Transform Your Organization Through Positive Psychology and Social Support. Jen, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Catherine. I've been looking forward to this all day. Thank you.
And I know your book just recently launched. I see it in your background. Can you hold it up?
Yes. Yes, I'd be happy to.
So exciting. You've gotten so many 5-star reviews already. And I'm just really happy that you decided to write this book. And I would love for you to share with everyone what inspired you to write this book, because I know you have a personal experience of feedback, perhaps feedback gone wrong, that led you to the work and led you to writing this book. So can you tell us a little bit about that part of your life?
Yeah, so I've been an executive coach for going on 12 years now, but prior to that, I spent 15 years working in the advertising industry. And while organizations may have a lot of feedback and performance management systems that we call out in the book as not being, as effective as they could be, advertising agencies sometimes don't have any at all. And so it's kind of like, what's worse, never getting feedback or getting feedback that's, not all that helpful. So I probably had a mix of that over all the different agencies where I worked. And eventually, as I was promoted into a leadership role and overseeing a department, and I was in the position to provide those feedback reviews, I took them very seriously and remember thinking, like, I want to give people what I longed to have, which is really helping them understand where they're being really effective, and then ways to help them grow and think throughout the course of their career, how could they be even more effective? So yeah, it was definitely kind of a heart moment when I had the opportunity to connect with Pete and think about how could we bring a different feedback experience into organizations, and particularly one that feels applicable for today's workforce, because I know this workforce really wants feedback, and as they should, because that's what helps us to grow and thrive.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I know you said they really want feedback, but I hear a lot that people dread feedback. The people giving feedback dread giving it. The people receiving it dread receiving it. And so how is the feedback model that's showcased in the book, the Shift Positive method that you use, how does that experience differ from traditional 360 feedback or any other feedback models?
Yeah, so what's great about Feedback Reimagined, and thanks to Pete and his extensive background in having his master's of applied positive psychology, is it's very science-based. And so when we really understand how our bodies and our brains work and react to different pieces of information, it helps you realize why the way historically feedback's been framed, which is, hey, here's a few things you're doing good, and here are your weaknesses or areas of improvement, why those things are triggering for folks, and how we literally have like a physiological reaction, almost as if our own life is in danger. That's kind of how it feels to experience feedback that way. So we were very intentional about trying to create an experience that still is quite constructive and helps people pave a path for how they can grow to be an even better leader, but doing so in a way that's choiceful and careful about the way that it's framed and delivered. So it doesn't create that reaction inside yourself when you're hearing it. One of the main ways we do that is we spend a lot of time focusing on what is working and what are people's strengths. And that's a whole kind of mindset and philosophy in and of itself. Strengths-based coaching's, I'd say, just in the last, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so, has gotten even more of a focus, but historically hasn't been one. And I think people really confuse positive feedback with strengths-based feedback. Positive feedback can be great job or nice, you did good in the presentation, but strengths-based feedback is really helping someone feel seen for what specifically is their unique talent. What did they bring to that thing that they did well? And help them really understand that is a strength of theirs, and how could they leverage it even more in new and different ways? Because what the research shows is that actually can help you go further faster, oftentimes more so than focusing on something that you feel you're not as good at. So that's one of the few core components of the shift positive method that for me, I get real passionate about, because I think as a society, we obsess about how we need to fix people and things. And oftentimes not oftentimes, all the time, there's something in everything and everyone that's already working. And oftentimes there's lots of things. And if we could just change our lens and see people through what's actually working and where they're effective and where they have their own natural talent, maybe we could actually help them grow even more.
That's really beautiful. And it is kind of, negativity bias, like our brains are wired to look for what's wrong or what's not working. So I love that the method focuses on what is working and really building that out for people. I'm so curious, because I remember in the book, there's a piece of this that is really about allyship and the teamwork that's happening behind, the experience of feedback, the allyship that you can build upon when you're focused on strengths. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that I love that word. It's kind of become a buzzword in its own right in the last few years for good reason. And in the context of feedback, what we mean by it is really the distinction between offering or giving somebody kind of feedback and then that's it, I've passed the information on, I'm done, versus actually creating like a two-way accountability. I'm going to offer you some feedback, Catherine, and I'm also going to offer or ask you what's a way I can support you and help you start along that path of showing up in a new way or a different way. And it's just what we know from research is we're not that successful when we try to change by ourselves, like in a vacuum. And so it's one thing to deliver the feedback better or differently, so it's more effective. And it's a whole other component to then actually become part of the process and help set that person up for success. Because it's just easy to fall back into our old ways if we're talking about behavioral shifts. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to break habits if I'm working on not interrupting people. So instead, I'm working on taking a pause, counting to 5, really being in listen mode, or prompting with a question instead of interrupting to give my thoughts. I might need a reminder going into that meeting, like, hey, why don't you focus on the questions today? Or, hey, like, what's the thing you're going to do to kind of count to 5? Or until that starts to become a well-practiced habit for me, I'm going to slip up. And so the folks around us to nudge us, remind us, and even more importantly, when I leave that meeting and I had a chance where I didn't, I practiced my new behaviors a few times to have somebody be able to call that out to me too and say, hey, I really saw you holding back. It created so much space for the team. Nice job. And that's going to feel so good to hear. That's going to help prime and reinforce that new behavior that I'm working on. So the allyship piece is essential.
Yeah, I love that. And accountability to make sure we're following through. So
totally.
So important. And then tell us about this transparency, because I know there's a lot of, kickback when people start thinking they are going to have to be transparent, because it's sometimes confidential feedback, right? But that system is broken, is what I'm understanding, and transparency is really more helpful for people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we have a couple go-to sayings. We like to say that confidentiality can be a symptom of a broken system. And what we mean by that is really people feel that's just the way it was always done. So I think that's just become an ingrained habit, whether it's a useful one or not. But B, I think people feel most inclined to want to be confidential when they're trying their best to offer constructive feedback, but they're framing it more in what the problem is. And so it feels bad to say that about someone. To call someone out for being an interrupter, might feel mean or unkind. And the reality is, if the feedback about that person could be a way that they could be more effective, is if they practiced pausing, if they focused on waiting for people to finish their thought and then asking a question instead of kind of jumping in with their perspective, whatever the little hack or new behavior might be, by focusing the feedback on more of that desired behavior, it's not that it's positive or negative. It's just more, the words we use is solution focused. And so what we found is when people know how to adequately deliver constructive feedback, they don't mind then having it not be anonymous or having it be transparent. And actually, I would go a step further to say people feel quite proud of themselves in learning how to frame things in a more productive way, and then recognizing the power and being able to paint the picture of what more effective could look like. It actually brings feedback back to that feeling of that is a gift, to paint a picture of what this person could be if they were even more effective in a few shifts that they could make behaviorally. They actually want their name attached to it, and they're willing to have a conversation about it, because just helping them paint that picture for that leader and get clear themselves, then it becomes less about something, oh, let's keep it confidential because I feel bad how I said it.
Thank you, Jen. And you gave so many like great little hacks right there in that description. And I know your book is full of that kind of thing, tips and suggestions and hacks for making feedback more safe for people to experience. And that is something that stood, out to me when I was reading the content of your book, is just that container of safety that this methodology creates for the feedback experience. And I know you're doing this in your work at Grow Collective. So can you speak about like how that looks or what the experience is like?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. So at Grow Collective, we work within a model that I created called the Grow Effect model. And one of the core components is the shift positive method. And what we found the power is really when we take that feedback experience and marry it with a couple other tools that we love, strengths assessments being one of them. And another tool that we use quite a bit is the Enneagram. And so what we found is the shift positive feedback experience is really robust. Oftentimes it's more feedback than anyone's ever gotten. And so to work with the leader a little bit before to raise their own self-awareness, walk them into the lens of strengths and having them actually see themselves through that in that way. And then the Enneagram is a whole other topic, but to really raise and elevate their own self-awareness from a very deep and inward place. What we found is then by the time they hear feedback from 5, 10, 12 of their colleagues, they're in a much more open space to actually hear it and see it and be more receptive to then creating what we call a growth development plan because they've already started to see and recognize some of that stuff within themselves. So we love just combining a few tools within a traditional coaching approach and helping leaders to grow in order to thrive.
I love that, Jen. Thank you so much. So how can listeners find you? What's your website and what's the best way to reach out and tell us where your book is?
Oh, sure. Yes. Well, the book is pretty much everywhere now. Amazon. We welcome and appreciate any Amazon reviews. It's also through Ingram Sparks. So that's Barnes and Noble and a few other book retailers that you'll probably rattle off faster than me. In terms of myself, you can find me on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect. Also, check out the Grow Collective. It's www.growcollective.us. And yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Jen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for this and to see what happens now that your book's out in the world. Big change coming.
Yes, and thank you and Nathan, because this has really been quite an experience for us over this past year. And you certainly guided us with a very nurturing and caring spirit, which has made the process really incredible.
Thank you so much. It's been our honor.